Hello, friends. I go by the name of host Eric. Some people call me Toast Eric, but that's not really my name. And I have a hypothesis regarding defeating toxic people. And also a corresponding hypothesis about what comprises, like, the most operational definition of somebody who's toxic. As usual, it turns out that cognitive functions contains all the answers in this hypothesis, anyway. It might not be a correct hypothesis. That's why it's a hypothesis rather than, say, a theory or a fact or a plate full of poo. Let me bring up the old internet browser on La Computadora, pulling up the chat on the big screen where I can see it more easily in the process. So, here's the notion about toxicity. Toxic people can't be held accountable on their fifth slot function. This is the hypothesis. So, Rachel's mom is not an entirely healthy person. She definitely has some accountability avoidance disorder. You might call her a narcissist, I'm not sure. But she certainly behaved in ways towards Rachel that were extremely toxic for lots of years. And she couldn't be held accountable on TI grounds, on fairness grounds. She refused to be held accountable on, like, TI kind of parsing. Normally, healthy people, if they don't validate on their fifth slot function, they they find themselves in a state of serious, like, hey, need to have a come to Jesus moment here, because if I can't attain if I can't uphold on my own fifth slot function, then I've got I'm in ontological distress. But instead of avoiding that ontological distress by having that come to Jesus moment when you don't uphold on your fifth slot function, toxic people just refuse to ever have that moment. So that's how you're going to encounter toxicity, is the person will be the expert in their dominant function, but not be constrained by their fifth slot function absolute value. So take Liz, for example, Corey's wife. She's BPD, toxic. She upholds her own absolute value of FI, front stack, but she is not in any way, shape, or form a team player. She fails to uphold even the fairly low bar you have for yourself for the fifth slot function. So it's like, because I'm an NE Dom, it's hard to catch me not telling the truth, because I've I've chosen my words very carefully. Um, I mean, so in that instance, you're looking at potentially an FE Dom who's failing to validate on their own fifth slot function. No, I think they express as somebody with all the skills of the dominant function, but none of the balancing constraint of the fifth slot function. So if you're an FI dom, then you're going to be caring about your own feelings a lot, but not being a team player and not seeming to be held accountable for hurting other people's feelings. It's hard to imagine an INFP who does as much harm in terms of hurting feelings as Liz does to Corey. But that's exactly what happens all the time. So the other part of this, so it's like SE Dom wouldn't be held accountable to their own past experience. Well, I may have made a bunch of bad impacts, but I'm going to just pretend like that never happened. And SI Dom would be fine with creating bad experiential impacts. They understand how important experience is to them and their experiences and how much it shapes who they are and how they go forward, etc. But they're fine with creating terrible memories for other people. Well, I'm getting to the third, sixth part in a second. It's actually third, sixth that's relevant here. So the thing is this, your third and your sixth slot function are both always the same kind of function, just like your second and seventh. So my third is FE, therefore my sixth is the other interface function, TE. Now, let's go back to this question of Liz. She's got NI in the sixth slot, and she's got SI in the third slot. She's not susceptible to critiques on FE grounds. You're not being a team player. You're not being a meow, meow, meow. She will always come back with, well, Corey's not meow, 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 meowing. So how would you fix a toxic person or defeat them so that you disempower them entirely? You have to kick them in the sixth slot function. So if instead of correcting Liz by saying you're not being fair or you're not being a good partner or you're hurting Corey's feelings or anything else like that, because if you say that, if I say you're hurting Corey's feelings, he's going to say, he's hurting my feelings, Instead, when she says, he's hurting my feelings, I should tell her, you're lying. You're lying. Because what's she going to then conclude? Because sixth slot's unconscious, she's going to conclude that she can no longer meet the terms of her third slot function. And the third slot function is your emergency last resort breaks. I gave an example to Rachel earlier. I was just kind of talking this idea out with her first because I was thinking it out, Is that it doesn't matter how correct I am, technically, or how true something is in eye level. 2, my tool function. 5, my absolute value for the world in general or whatever. If it's not going to play well, I'm not going to go there. And what I mean by not play well, for example, let's say the subject of age of consent came up, and someone was making arguments that we should lower the age of consent to 16. I'm not going to give those arguments a fair accounting because there's only one way that's going to ever play. If I'm making arguments in favor of lowering the consent to age of 16, it's always going to play as I'm some old creepy guy who wants to bang 16-year-olds, right? So I'm never even going to entertain the possibility of making those kinds of arguments because even if I could win the case, I'm going to lose in the court of public opinion, right? So the thing is, when you kick somebody in their sixth slot function, the reason it works is because they think it it is triggering that third slot function, their conscious one. So like the reason it's easy to kick me in my sixth slot and say, you how could you not have been able to figure that out, is because I think that makes me look bad. Not because I care about whether I could figure it out or not. You know, if you're talking about some sort of like ordinated thing, right? Now, if a person's not toxic, you shouldn't critique them in their sixth slot function. You should critique them honestly, as is appropriate contextually. You shouldn't try to socially manipulate people or something. But what um what made me realize all of this was how Rachel's mom is. I have not heard her have a toxic engagement with Rachel for a long time. Now, Rachel has trouble like understanding her mom's ways as love, because her mom tries to love her by TEing her, and that just hits Rachel right in her polar, and she just feels like criticized rather than helped, right? But the thing that changed Rachel's mom, that defeated her, is that made her a supplicant rather than us the supplicants, was when she incurred some impact she didn't anticipate. So, sometime back, I don't remember exactly how long it was ago, Rachel and I went down to see her mom in um, San Diego, and Rachel's mom tried to pull some shit. Rachel called her bluff. I went down there and picked Rachel up, and Rachel's mom made a poor decision to say these words before we left. Like, if you leave with Eric, I am disowning you. Well, we called her bluff again, and she didn't have any contact really with Rachel for a long, long time. So, well, I think it's most exhausting to keep track of if you're FE2. But, and so what happened there was her mom incurred negative impacts, real impacts that were hurtful to her. She no doubt interpreted them as, I failed to anticipate adequately the possible outcomes of these words. In other words, she viewed it as a failure to uphold the minimum threshold for her third slot function. And that's the breaks of last resort, right? It's like, I will use my dominant tool, but if there's no way I can achieve good results on my third by doing so, then I will have to, no matter how toxic and broken I am, I'm going to have to reevaluate. The toxic and brokenness means you don't have to reevaluate when you violate your fifth slot function because it's unconscious. Well, this is the thing, Winston's mom. She assumed, she made the false intuitive leap that we were going to stay in the metaphysical realm. In other words, that she could continue using words, but she got shut off. Okay, consider yourself disowned then, bitch. No, you can't talk to her until you have a full accounting with me, is what she was informed. And of course, she's toxic, so she can't have an accounting with me because she'd have to be accountable to her fifth slot function. So she had her come to Jesus moment, experiencing actual impacts from her poor choice of words. And now she's tame as a kitten. I'll tell you, that bitch practically falls all over herself, not offending me. Or Rachel. But the thing is, she's not trying to offend Rachel. She's desperately trying not to offend Rachel. she's just really not very good at not offending Rachel because she keeps trying to TE Rachel, which is not something Rachel wants to have done to her. I don't think anybody from her family is flying out here for the Christmas party. We invited them as just sort of an FE management thing, but we didn't really expect any of them to come out. It's a big, you'd have to be pretty rolling to fly out here for a Christmas party from across the country.
Yeah, she's kind of like.
What do I mean by TE, Rachel? Well, like today, she had texted Rachel, like, call me when you get up. I've got some ideas. Well, what were her ideas have to do with? They had to do with solving two problems of ours that we don't need solved. The first one was her thoughts about getting Rachel health insurance until I didn't even wait for Rachel to cue me to with her eyes like I don't know what to say. I heard that and that's just like red meat to a dog. I was like, here's why it's a terrible idea to get health insurance. and and then the other thing she wanted to do was, which was very nice, she wanted to offer to share with Rachel some of the family's Christmas ornaments and stuff. She's assuming she's got a, SI frame like her mom does, but of course we we had amusingly just like the day before a conversation where I was talking with Rachel about how I don't want any one-offs. I don't want any personal ornaments. I don't want any family pictures on the tree or any of that stupid bullshit. I want it to look classy. I want like 3 different kinds of ornaments, like a set of silver balls, a set of red meows, a set of meows, and that's it. Nice and clean. Plus, it's called bunting. That it's like tinsel, but it's like a snake of tinsel. But isn't the bottom line survival of all these perception sports don't impact survival necessity? Does it even matter? Absolutely not. The bottom line is not survival. We see that in kamikaze pilots in World War II and suicide bombers. We see that in people giving up their lives for their children. We see people dying for reasons other than they can't avoid it all the time. Because that's not the prime directive. The prime directive is not to stay alive. The prime directive is to close the gap between expectations and realities. Well, I am so excited about our Christmas tree this year because I have a tree that I've eyed on the hill. It's a fir tree. It's actually a grand fir, not a Douglas fir. I previously reported it was a Douglas fir. I didn't realize that there's actually I was watching an episode of Alone and somebody on Alone was just articulating the difference between Douglas and Grand Firs, and then I went and looked and I was like, oh, I guess it's not a Douglas fir. Anyway, they look very similar. And we know where it's gonna go and how tall it needs to be. So it's gonna go right here. Where this table is. Okay, we're gonna move this table. So it's gonna be this tall. It's like, if we moved it over here, it could go way taller, but we don't want it to take up that much room, so we're just gonna make it to go this tall. I found the perfect tree outside. And I look at it every couple of days to see how it's ripening. Anyway, we're gonna cut down that tree from my own hill, my own naturally grown Christmas tree. It's like a perfect looking Christmas tree too. I'm gonna cut down my own personal Christmas tree from my own hill and bring her here. And the thing is, it's fun because it's like there were, I guess, some like big. I think there was. Well, I know there was one big wind event that knocked over a bunch of trees before we got here, and etc. But for whatever reason, um, for whatever reason, the prickly stickler. Um, if you have too much free time and nothing going on in your life, then you probably go to people's live streams and shit on them for no reason. I was briefly at Taylor's live stream tonight, just because I thought the title was funny. But of course, I can't tolerate watching that because because people say varying degrees of wrong things, and if I were on that panel, then if there were any proper justice in the universe, it would change from a panel to a class in which everybody else was taking notes while I spoke. Sorry, that's just how it is. Yeah, I did state my hypothesis, which is that toxic people are toxic because they can't be held accountable on their fifth slot function, and that the only way you can actually defeat them is to kick them in their sixth slot function, which they'll perceive as a failing of their third slot function. So, for example, if you got an ESTJ toxic person, they need to experience bad concretized impacts. It's the only way they're going to change. On the other hand, if you got an INFP toxic person, they need to be told they're lying all the time. That way, their bad behavior will consistently trigger a consequence. They stand even less than not engaging in the bad behavior. If you got, say, an ENFJ toxic person, well, what does it mean to be toxic if you're an ENFJ? It means you're managing perceptions of you great, but you don't actually care if you hurt other people's feelings. And if you do hurt other people's feelings, you can't be held accountable for that. So what would you do to solve that? You'd accuse them of being unoriginal, uncreative, and intuitively flaccid, I guess. Toxics mean bad guys, yeah. Well, toxic people are people who engage in behavior that is universally bad. So it's like it's kind of hard for us to define this term really precisely, but we can come up with examples of stuff that we do agree universally is toxic, like domestic violence, right? Nobody thinks, well, sometimes it's okay to beat your wife. No decent human being thinks that. But because communication is so slithery, it's a lot harder to determinedly say, "Yeah, thing is toxic," because contextually it may or may not be toxic. If you're reading an article that says signs your partner might be a narcissist, well, that's a poor way to approach things because, well, it's a dangerous way to approach things because there are lots of behaviors that narcissists do that other people do the same thing, but because of some slight tweak to how it's done, that in other words, you can't determine toxicity really without intentionality, and it's hard to be definitive about intentionality because that's subjective data. So like we generally agree that certain very narrowly conscribed behaviors are toxic, such as threatening to break up with your partner in order to try to get him to do things. You know, leveraging, making your partner feel unsafe in order to get what you want is always going to be toxic. But but there are a fairly small number of those things that we can be definitive about, because one thing that toxic people are typically very good at is getting other people to think that you're the toxic one. After all, they're experts at pushing buttons and eliciting responses from you that are legitimately large responses to legitimately bad behavior, but that aren't perceived that way by others necessarily. There's a big terrible tendency in the world to create false equivalencies in situations with toxic people, because whenever you've got conflict between two non-toxic people, it's almost always some he said, she said, it's somewhat his fault, somewhat her fault, blah blah blah, right? With toxic people, it's not the case. One person is entirely at fault and the other person is not at fault at all. We don't have that narrative entrenched well enough, because one of the key things that toxic people utilize to be toxic is the fact that everyone wants to be fair and assume that, both sides have their points and yeah. Toxic people exploit that to no end to create uncertainty in third parties about you and the toxic person. Like, most people in Rachel's life thought she was the problem, not her mom, not her brother. After all, she was crazy and not doing what she needed to take care of her mental health. In other words, not obeying insane, arbitrary instructions to quit smoking pot, right? And then all of a sudden that gets like, well, it's gray area. It's not gray area at all, you stupid fucks. People who are in family members are supposed to love each other in ways that they want to be loved, not in the ways that they want to love. I want to love you by making you feel bad all the time is not an acceptable notion, right? But anyway, that's some of the tricks they use. So, what Rachel's mom needed to experience were some real concrete consequences that she did not anticipate, that were negative. And then her last resort breaks, her third slot function is, and you can think of cognitive function slots as being how you interpret things too. Like, let's say Rachel says, I read an article. Let's say one day I'm walking in front of Rachel and she says later on, she's like, so this is what it looks like when someone doesn't really care about you, because I was walking in front of her like 6 feet or something. And I would assume that what she means is that she was giving me cues that it was upsetting her that she wanted to walk next to me, and that I was giving her cues that I didn't care at all what she wanted, and that obviously I needed to do better at giving her cues, right? But it turns out that she had read an article before we left that said signs your partner doesn't really love you, as a way of reassuring herself that I did love her. And that article said if your partner walks in front of you instead of walking beside you, it's a red flag. So this is an actual true thing that happened. Okay. Um, the point is, being an SI conscious means I'm going to assume about her that she's referencing her own experience when when saying that to me. But she's not referencing her own experience at all. She's so distant from her own experience that she looks up articles online to see if she's so foreign from checking her own subjective experience that she looks up articles online to see if she's happy. you know. um, just for the record, the weather today is calm and sunny, but the air is full of bullshit. I like that. So the point is, when she says something like that, that she feels like she knows Nya now, I'm gonna think she's referencing her personal experience in general. Instead, she's just found an example in her experience that matches something she read online and is going with what it says online. So the point is, I do the same thing. If like if she says something universal, I think, but I can make a connection to me. I'm going to think she's making some sort of commentary on me. If I can come up with, in my memory, an experience shared by the two of us that might have prompted her to say this universal thing as a way of hinting that she's talking about this particular experience, I'm going to assume she is, right? 10 times I'm unhappy. And you could understand the sixth and third slot functions equivalently as when you're critiquable in your sixth slot function because you think that failures there represent a failure in your third slot function. I don't care if I can't figure out the logic or something unless it's made me look bad. Or potentially making, give me a bad FI experience. Do NI people get shame shivers? Not nearly as much. If and maybe probably SI polar pretty much never gets shame shivers, I would guess. Like Rachel does not get nearly as many shame shivers as I do. Pretty much, I have to remind her of something that for her to re-experience the shame of it. Am I going to do some more breeding, Eric? No, I'm not planning on having any more children. I'd be concerned that they might come out like you. Yeah, this is my third marriage. Third and final marriage. Rachel, she's a lot wiser than me. She was never married when I married her. She had never been even engaged before. Well, if you would like to know about how to prevent pregnancy, I can direct you to a couple of government websites that will inform you about contraception options available to you and every other person. But rather than doing so, I'll just tell you to fucking Google it. No, it's called pull out. Why would I want to impose contraceptive harms upon my wife? Yeah, I do some of that. Okay, prickly stickler. You get a wonder point for that excellent joke. Pull out is cope. Copper IUD is copper. Well, prickly stickler, obviously you've not encountered the problem I have before with a partner who had an IUD. It pokes the tip of my dick. So if you want to experience that, go for it. I don't want to. Yeah. Every time. Get to the top and poke the tip of my dick. No, I don't think so. You come where you want to come, I'll come where I want to come. How about that, motherfucker? I thought, hey, if he's going to throw me a softball, I have a perfectly good reason why I don't like IUDs, right? It's absolutely relevant to the topic. And so it's not like I'm going to bring up that subject myself, but if the boot fits, motherfucker. That's right. Big Pimpin', you meow. Okay, go do some laundry. Boy, I sure won that exchange. It's nice to win an exchange. But he does get a wonder point for that great joke about pull out his cope, IED is coper. That's really great. I somehow I doubt he made it up, but I like it anyway. Well, we do have a proper cutting edge intellectual here. Just in the sentence right there. Oliver Linehan. I guess I'm feeling my oats tonight, huh? I'm feeling better than I have in a long time. You know, Rachel and I had kind of a emotional conversation, processing some old emotional constipation, I guess, that we hadn't processed yet. And it was very liberating. I feel like, it's like this is the day after I finished my little brief Adderall run. I went down there Thursday night, got it, took it Thursday night, took it Friday morning. slept Friday night, slept a little bit Thursday night, and then Saturday morning I took the last of it. And it's now Sunday night, but I just feel fantastic. I was a little tired earlier. I took a nap. I thought we were getting to bed, but I just feel like happy. Like I feel like I'm taking joy in things again. I watched, I don't know, several hours of anime this morning, and it was just spectacular. I laughed, I cried, I sat forward like this. It was just fantastic. And I had sexual intercourse with my wife. And we ate lunch, took a nap. And I got up and started watching some football. Watched a good portion of the first half of the game against the Giants and the Bills. And then at halftime, I watched a very fun episode. Let me see something. Hey, Rachel.
Yes?
Did I say something to hurt your feelings or something?
No, why?
Oh, because I figured since you had tuned out, maybe I had said something off-putting.
Oh, no. I just wanted to listen to a song.
Sure, yeah, of course. Now, I'm not saying you should feel compelled to listen to this. I just wanted to make sure I hadn't offended you in some way. All right, cool. Yeah, and the Giants should have won that game. At the end of the first half, the quarterback made a very boneheaded play. Well, because I talked about something that happened with the previous girlfriend, with the IUD stuff. So I thought that might have been inconsiderate of me upon reflection, you know. Yeah, they should have won that game because at the end of the first half, the quarterback had, I don't know what the down was, but it was end goal from like the 1 yard line, right? And the coach called a run play option, a run pass option, but had indicated, this is a passing play. Obviously don't run the ball because if you run the ball, we have no timeouts left. And even though it's not fourth down, we won't be able to spike the ball in time to kick the field goal. And the Giants are not a team that scores a lot of touchdowns. They need every field goal they can get, all right? And the quarterback, he checked to the run and it got stuffed and they didn't get that 3 points. And that's right. And then on the last play from regulation at the end of the fourth quarter, well, first of all, the first last play of regulation, they called pass interference and were right to do so, but it was not the most blatant pass interference call ever. And then so they got an untimed down from the 1 yard line. And then they didn't call pass interference on the next play, which was way more pass interference than the one before. So I think the Giants have a lot of reason to complain about that non-call at the end there. The reason they didn't call it was because, well, we just called pass interference. We don't want to have another untimed down. Why? The fucking Bills DBs know that too. That's how it's going to go with the refs. And so they just are like mugging the receiver in the end zone. I don't really care who wins the game. Because I already knew by the time that game was at halftime, I had definitely lost my fantasy football matchup this week. I mean, I knew on Thursday that I had lost it when I realized that Russell Wilson was playing on Thursday, and I had failed to put back in my starting quarterback who had a bye last week, which is the Chargers starting quarterback, whose name escapes me at the moment. I keep wanting to say Justin Herbert, but that's not it. It's what's that guy's name? Like in the Chargers quarterback. That's my starting quarterback. He obviously puts up better numbers week in and week out than Russell Wilson, my backup quarterback, does. Uh, oh, is it Justin Herbert? Oh, wow. I guess I was right. Yeah, Rachel does too. We both lost this week. But my team, actually, Rachel still has a chance, but it's a long shot. She's got somebody playing on Monday. My team, like every player except Tyreek Hill, underperformed their projection. Like, what the fuck? But then, when you fail to sub back in your starting quarterback in time, because I figure, oh, well, it's not close to Sunday yet. And the only being and reason for being, so the being and the reason are the same thing. I mean, people have a variety of different reasons for being. I could cite you 1,000 different reasons for being right now. Why do you insist there's only one? Are you invalidating any possible reasons for being that I might produce? After all, isn't a reason for being a person's justification for being? And isn't a person entitled to equal legitimacy in their justifications for subjective matters? I think so. But I appreciate you engaging in the topic. Topics of ontology and teleology are always interesting. But no, you can't reduce all ontology to a single teleology of continuing to exist because we have too many counterexamples to falsify that notion. We have plenty of examples of people who sacrificed their own lives for some cause or another. So obviously, we cannot conclude that the prime directive of human beings is to stay alive. Counterexamples falsify in that instance. What about football do I enjoy? Well, I have to pass that. It sounds like, well, correct, logic isn't immediate in the sense that a person deliberates logically and that takes time, whereas knowledge is instantaneous. But remember, logic itself doesn't have the capacity to manifest. That's an attention paid by an, say, a contradiction or logical construction. Reality supervenes upon observation first and foremost. Remember, things don't act in contradiction, right? People note contradictions attentionally. People point out a contradiction in what you're saying right here and reality, as I'm doing right now. Your denial in denial of contradiction that I pointed out. So I've used my attentional manner to deliberate about what you're saying, and I've pointed out an obvious contradiction between your claim and empirical reality that we can agree observationally is necessarily the case. In other words, that contradictions aren't agents. Logic isn't an agent. It can't take action like an agent can, right? You're committing a reification fallacy. And you're lecturing to the wrong guy. You should be taking notes. But most kinds of it seems like a majority of false paths philosophically are are being the charge is being led by a horse mounted person called reification fallacy. Almost all of the failure of people to understand philosophy derives from that. The attribution of the quality of agency to things that are not agents. It's a thing we do all the time for sort of colloquial communication, and as a consequence, we train many people have inevitably, because of their stack, they aren't really able to parse it all out or whatever. They just continue to be baffled by the same problem. They're not distinguishing between things that actually have agency and things that are just concepts. They're failing to distinguish between claims that are, descriptive, claims that are prescriptive, claims that are normative, etc. They're just not using language well. But reification fallacy is the most common manifestation of someone not using language well. Note, what I did there is I used manifestation correctly. It's the manifestation of an agent, meow, meow. That's fine. That's not metaphor then. Then you're actually saying something. No, people use logic. When they do, they check for consistency. Okay? Using one way in which logic is helpful is that it allows us to meaningfully, it allows us to do intellectual work provided we meaningfully define our terms. And that means operationally define them. So an agent is that which can take independent action. That's the definition of it, right? So a volcano might be an agent, a human might be an agent, a bird might be an agent, but a contradiction is not, nor is a logic. It's important we use words precisely if we're going to try to dabble in philosophical matters. Using words sloppily like you're doing is not doing anybody any good. Okay, so you're not. This is another thing that's difficult here. So I just addressed what you said, right? Well, you need to remember that. Yeah, it really is actually that boy Klaus. That no reality exists except such that observation precedes it. Okay. There's nothing we can talk about, say anything at all, reference, blah, 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 that doesn't begin with an individual's observation first. So once you remember that, that'll help you get rid of a lot of this wrongness you're stuck in. So yeah, evolutionary theory is the idea that your genes have intentionality and a desired goal, which of course they don't. That your genes want to reproduce themselves. I mean, the mechanism is such that people want to fuck, and your genes get spread around accordingly, but it's not because they want to or because you want to. We don't have an answer as to why things are the way they are. Okay, well, you're not. See, here's the thing, prickly stickler. When I read your thing, I respond to what you say on point. You responded to something I said, agent, but you didn't respond on point. So my point's still standing, and until you've responded on point and defeated it, you're just whistling Dixie. You're trying to move forward when your engine's still broken. You know, you can't drive the car until you fix that engine. So until you respond to the agency point on point in a meaningful way, then you're just masturbating in the wind. Well, that's the claim, except the idea of a gene being evolutionarily advantageous suggests that the species as a whole has an interest. That's where the fallacy comes in. Species can't have an interest, right? Only individuals can have an interest. So it is structured such that the opposite of what you say is true. That anytime there's deviance from a genomic mean too far, that deviance is squashed by reality. Those things die off very quickly. Unfortunately, if a deviance is small enough from the genomic mean, then it might be a genomic illness that enters the species. So a species will never change for the entire duration of its existence, but its genome will get progressively sicker as per the inclusion of sickle cell anemia into the human genome, etc. And that's from epigenetic change. And we know that obviously evolution doesn't produce speciation because every single time we've attempted to falsify the theory, it has falsified. Additionally, the theory keeps changing its mechanism. It's like, evolution is this. No, I mean, it's this. I mean, it's this. I mean, it's this. So there's absolutely no reason to think, no reason to put any credence on the notion that evolution produces speciation whatsoever. Everything we know about selection does the opposite. It pushes species back to the genomic mean. So, if all the people were to disappear and all the dogs were to be let go, they would revert back to a medium dog, right? Or something approaching a wolf. They would not create separate populations of chihuahuas and bulldogs and shit like that. All those deviations from the genomic mean would die, obviously. If in fact any possible notion of speciation from genetic change within a species over time were true, then it would no longer be possible to produce reproductively viable offspring between chihuahuas and wolves. Obviously, I mean, nature is never going to create that much differentiation within a species as intentional human breeding for thousands of years will. And so if we can't even by differentiating so much that we've got a dire wolf and a chihuahua and they still have reproductively viable offspring, then we can throw the notion of speciation out by a genetic variation within a species completely out the window. Additionally, if evolution were true, then the generational length of a species would be determinate and regarding its evolutionary speed. We see fruit flies evolving all the time rapidly because they go over thousands and thousands and thousands of generations in the time that other species just take a couple of generations, you know? If in fact there were any credence to evolution, then evolutionary scientists would be able to write a genetic clock that would allow us to actually time backwards how long it takes something to evolve, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If you actually think about it, the more you think about it, the more you realize how completely fucking insane it is for people to claim that we have an explanation for speciation from evolutionary science. It's insane, wrong, crazy, dumb, stupid, and just mind-bogglingly contradictory. Every time we've tested it, it's falsified. We've not verified a single prediction, not one. It is treated like nothing like an actual theory ever gets treated like. Note, I am not a creationist. Okay? I don't think creationism is an explanation for speciation either, obviously, because I actually know what an explanation is. But evolution is the most appalling defilement of the scientific method that has ever besmirched the good name of academia. It is sickening that biologists have been allowed to get away with that bullshit. They would not be allowed to get away with it if they were physicists. Guarantee you that. Nor chemists, nor, I don't know, mechanical engineers, computer scientists, or any other real kind of scientist. And the craziest thing of all is sometimes you hear people say, well, it's better than no explanation. No, it's not. The wrong explanation, or the complete absence of an explanation with a name and a claim that it's an explanation, which is what evolution is not better than the correct answer, which is we don't know. Then the correct answer is, the prickly stickler, we don't know. Smart people have ambiguity tolerance. The fact that we don't have a good theory to explain speciation means the correct answer is we don't know. We don't have a good explanation for speciation. We can speculate. We could come up with various speculations, from sim theory to aliens crash landing here and we're actually those aliens who lost our technology, to any myriad number of speculations. But the point is, when we don't know what the explanation for something is, we don't produce our speculative bullshit as the explanation. We say we don't know. Oh, really? Astafasta? It is that observation. No, it's not an observation. It's the claim, Astafasta, that evolution, that one species can diverge into two if selective pressures are applied. It's the claim, not an observation, sir. And what I'm telling you is that claim is false. We have falsified it a myriad times. You've not answered any of my points. So, I mean, if you can't answer any of my points in a definitive way that wins the point, you should have zero inclination to believe in evolution at all. You're doing yourself and the world a disservice. Where? When? Speciate something. Speculation is fine as long as you call it speculation, right? If you call it a theory, then you're doing us all a great disservice. You have to be honest about what you're saying. Well, put it this way. I interviewed an evolutionary scientist before on this channel. It's in the content somewhere. And by the end of our conversation, he was left with the following justification for evolution. You don't get it. There are rhythms. There are rhythms to nature. Because he couldn't answer any of my questions. You'll note that when I make claims, I can answer all of your questions about those claims in convincing ways. Why can't they? Is it because it's too complicated for me to understand? I don't think so, motherfuckers. Why can't they respond to any of my obviously winning arguments? It's not because I'm such a great debater. It's the reason I'm a great debater is because I always choose the best arguments. If you're right, it's easy to be a great debater. If you're wrong, it's hard. Possible, but hard. And I'm not such a great debater. First of all, I don't have any fucking interest in this subject. When I started looking into it, I was curious as to why this was confusing me. I thought I should get around to figuring out how this actually works now. Looked into it, only to discover, oh my God, it's nothing but complete bullshit, begging the question, mistaking genetics for evolution, and a complete absence of a defensible mechanism. And still, everybody references it all the time. It's treated as gospel truth. It was shocking to discover this. You know, I guarantee you this much. I have researched the subject way more than anybody who tries to argue with me about it. Way more thoroughly and way more intelligently. I'm a debate coach. I don't give a fuck if evolution's right or wrong. I care what the best arguments are, what the winning arguments are. That's why I get to be right, because I don't care which side is correct. And I'm a fucking world-class expert on case building, case negating, etc. What I care about is repeating this experience over and over again. When I'm making claims, then nobody ever says anything that makes me lose the argument. So how do you do that? You always make the winning arguments. And you don't care about, you don't have an opinion going in about which side you'd like to be correct. You'd like the correct side to be correct. It's like, I've made the case against evolution so many times and so powerfully on so many occasions, and received not a single rebuttal that gave me any pause ever. And remember, I'm willing to be corrected. The only reason I'm so certain of it at this point is because of the thing I just said. I've made this case so many times, so powerfully, so definitively, and I have never received a single rebuttal that's given me any pause. I can hardly conceive of a worse case than evolution makes. It's like if a debate coach made that case, I would say, we have to fire this person right now. They have no concept of how to make a convincing case for anything. What's most shocking to me is the following thing. I can't count the number of people who've come through here, heard me falsify evolution in no uncertain terms, had no rebuttal to it, and still think, well, but evolution though. I can't even conceive of a world in which I'd be capable of that. I can't, that's what it means to be T.I. Tool, I guess, and any dumb. I literally can't even put myself in those people's shoes. Having heard these absolutely damning arguments against it, and noted over multiple occasions, possibly, the total lack of substantive response to anything you're saying, I still somehow think I believe in evolution when I don't even know what it is, because nobody does. You know, but there's a current camp of evolutionary scientists whose position is that species has no definition. Why? Because the definition of species is being able to produce reproductively viable offspring falsifies evolution. It does so definitionally. If to be a species is to be defined as that which produces other members of the same species that are reproductively viable, then how does the species change over time? After all, to be the same species is defined as producing other instances of that same species. Not something else. Now, granted, that definitional proof is not anywhere close to the most damning argument against evolution, but it shows you how concentric circles these fuckers have gotten. Remember when Galileo said, actually, it's the sun that's the center of the solar system? And the church was like, no, God made it so the earth is the middle. And then they came up with all these complicated mathematics and concentric circles to try to maintain the perfection of God's spheres rather than accepting a heliocentric universe. That's exactly what evolution is doing. It's just all over that fucking map, scrambling to try to obey the church's thick doctrine that evolution explains where speciation comes from. And that's very much the modern church, you know? Academia. What could be a more clear example of the modern church than entrenched academia with their careers on the line tied to this imaginary boat? Half-wits and fools, I tell you. The world is full of half-wits and fools. I feel so good. I'm not even like on any drugs at all. I just feel like, fuck yeah. You know, obviously, feeling good also makes me feel cautious. Like, in my youth, even in my old age, feeling good sometimes spins into excessive irkiness in ways that I later regret, you know. You gotta temper whatever swagger you're feeling with mindfulness, you know. Trauma just cuts the legs out from your swagger. But in its most healthy incarnation, it tempers it with mindfulness. That's assuming you're an extrovert, you know. I'm not sure what introverted swagger is called. I guess just self assuredness. Small price to pay. The gall of the presumptuousness. I mean, you're not answering any of my points, Astapasta. There's a branching fossil record. That's certainly not proof of divergence via the mechanism you're claiming. And the point is, if you don't have a mechanism, you can't claim that species do diverge without saying how. There's no definitive reason to conclude that. We can speculate myriad other possible explanations for the branching fossil record. Well, you're very different than me, prickly stickler. You know, I'm smart. You just make unsubstantiated claims for no reason. And then don't respond to my substantiated responses. So we're pretty different. We're strikingly different, you and I. Shockingly different, even. Okay, but geographic separation doesn't explain how the species genome changes. In other words, there are pigeons all over the world, local populations of pigeons all over the world, in all different kinds of natural stress situations, right? So why don't we see speciation among them? There are different populations, local populations of fruit flies that go through countless generations in the time that, say, one elephant generation goes through or something. But we don't see that. We actually don't see that. We see plenty of localized populations in myriad different contexts, and we don't see any differentiation. Why not? We don't. Pigeons are pigeons. Even where there is differentiation, when we have a definition of species, they can still interbreed. We are only drawing conclusions about things that have already happened all the time, right? But we can't demonstrate the mechanism at all. And when we look to the actual world, what do we see? The world falsifies your claims. The point is, fruit flies never stop being fruit flies, even if there's differentiation within the genome. There are category areas here, right? It's like I can change my body by, here's an analogy, okay? By lifting weights. I can make my muscles bigger. I can lift heavier things. I can improve my performance in various ways. But I can't fly by flapping my arms no matter how long and often I do it, right? So there are set limits. You got to understand, think when something's a set or in which case it's not variable, or a component within the set, in which case it is variable. It's like something has to stay the same. in your equation here. But look, I don't even want to get into it with you because you've already made clear you don't care if you have the mechanism, because the fact is selective pressures has been disproved as the mechanism. It's contraindicative by the mathematics of population, for one thing. Like, how small of a population would it have to be? And why would a population, individual within that population, happen to have a variation consistent with this new selective pressure? Scientists have long since disproven the notion of any kind of positive mutation, hence the nearly neutral theory of evolution, which has also been disproved. Mathematically, it's impossible. Genetic drift is plausible, but only in populations of up to 100. As soon as it gets over 100, it becomes impossible. Hence, since everything kept falsifying, they came up with what's called the founder's effect and bottleneck system, in which all evolutions were a series of two disparate individuals from a population separating off into a little island by themselves and then breeding their difference over and over again into a new species, which makes absolutely no fucking sense. Right? None. If, in fact, of course, we have to explain the Cambrian explosion. Well, why is it that there were all of these species? We used to say that evolution happened slowly over 4 billion years. In fact, Darwin said if we could falsify that notion, it would falsify evolution. But the Cambrian explosion falsifies that notion. How do we explain all these species coming in just 10 million years or so? How do we explain it? Oh, well, we explain it with punctuated equilibrium. So this is what happens when the fundamental notion is bullshit. You keep changing the explanation. So I've actually researched the subject a great deal, Astapasta, unlike you, obviously. So what happened to punctuated equilibrium? Well, I read an article about a year and a half ago that it also has been mathematically disproven. In other words, population mathematics make it impossible for that explanation to be correct. So mathematicians keep saying no. The scientists, the real thinkers, no. But what happens is evolutionists keep begging the question. Okay, well, if it's not that reason why evolution is right, then it must be some other reason why evolution is right. Because after all, evolution is right. That's what you're doing right now, begging the question. You say, well, it's selective pressures. You mean reproductive selection? Selecting in favor of preferable genetics? After all, each species has the same genome. Yes, there's a certain amount of variation within the genome, but how does it stop being the same genome? How do you get from 13 to 14 chromosomes or whatever? No, it doesn't. No, there are only negative mutations. This has long since been disproved. This was disproved in the early 70s, in fact. That's how slow we are to update our reality about this. You've been taught that with some textbooks that just refuse to accept that actually we're way past the notion of mutations having anything to do with it. That's where epigenetic theory came from and the nearly neutral theory came from, is because it's been established there are no positive mutations, at best nearly neutral. And epigenetics only explains what I've already explained. You're not even responding to what I've already said. It's right. Yes, epigenetics explains increased sickness in a species genome. In other words, a species genome becomes sicker over time as certain deviations from the genomic mean become entrenched. That's where sickle cell anemia comes into play and stuff like that, right? Google it. Why? It's like, why are you even arguing with me when you obviously haven't researched it at all? Why would you think that you are going to be right about evolution when you've not researched it at all? I've researched it extensively. I've made a series of powerfully compelling arguments. Why would you even bother research? Okay, yeah, if you've researched it, then you would know the answer to the question, You wouldn't ask, there are no positive mutations? Ask Google it. Are there any positive mutations? And you say you've researched it and you haven't even Googled that question, then you are a shitty researcher, my friend. Brickley Stickler, you're calling me superstitious? What makes me superstitious? What am I being superstitious about? If we chuck a bunch of bricks and it happens to look like the pile of the house, it doesn't mean you should move into it. MBTI is not superstition. MBTI is a wrong articulation of people's the fact that people pay attention in different ways. If you don't think people pay attention in different ways, well, I'm not going to bother trying to convince you because you've not been convincible about anything else so far, nor have you been responsive on any of my points. So until you show the capacity to do that, I'm not going to waste my breath. That's not why I do tarot readings. I don't do tarot readings because I'm superstitious. I do tarot readings because I love my wife. If Rachel likes tarot, then I like tarot.
What?
I said I don't do tarot readings because I'm superstitious. I do tarot readings because I love my wife.
Aww.
And if she loves tarot, then I love it too.
It's fun.
It is fun. Did you Google it? I'm not wrong on this because I don't care, you know. If evolution had a good case, I'd be pounding the pulpit for it. I don't like being on the losing side of things. Sorry. And I'm a much better case evaluator than you are. You should be objective enough to acknowledge that. Well, that may be why people like to deny evolution, but that's not why I'm denying evolution. And that's why most rationalists have such a hard time with accepting that evolution is bullshit. Because it's been entrenched in all of us that you are either a religious person or you believe in evolution. And that's why evolution as theory theater evolution needs to make predictions that you can test and then validate. Ask the pastor, if you want to believe in evolution, point to me some predictions that evolution makes that we can test and validate. Because I got an idea. Since fruit flies have such quick generations, why don't we prove evolution by speciating them, turning a fruit fly into a dragonfly? How about we do that? Or into anything that's not a fruit fly. Surely we've done that plenty of times since we've known about evolution for such a long time. And oh, I know. How about I got it? How about we breed dogs until they're so different that they can't reproduce with each other anymore and produce reproductively viable offspring? That's how we can prove evolution. Oh wait, the evidence falsifies evolution in both those instances. Well, how about some predictions we can validate? Like a theory, like an actual science thing. How about making some predictions? that actually test out and instead of falsifying, validate. How about that? It's funny how for real theories, they make real predictions, and those predictions validate. Take the theory of relativity, for example. At first, it was an untested theory, but Einstein's theory made predictions. And as technology developed and we were able to better test those predictions, guess what? They validated. Wow, science! That's how science works, remember? Evolution doesn't. Evolution thinks that when your predictions don't validate, you change your mechanism and change it and make new predictions now. Oh, those don't validate either. Well, but evolution is still right, so let's change our mechanism again, make new predictions, and explain it with punctuated equilibrium. You know, sometimes evolution just stops, and then sometimes it goes really fast, and then sometimes it stops again. Why? Well, because how else can you explain the Cambrian explosion? After all, evolution's right. Watch me beg the question again. That's that shit is just fucking that any thinking person could know what how the changes evolution's explanations have gone through, its failure to validate any of his predictions, and still afford it anything other than the status of something you squat over and shit upon is insane. That's not science. To quote Berlinski, it's a collection of anecdotes. If you want to see somebody else smart talk about evolution, look at David Berlinski's videos on it. I even took at least one argument from him. So that's saying something. That's a smart guy. I learned something from him. Because everybody thinks that evolution is possible, plausible, makes sense because the change is so slow for 4 billion years. Except the Cambrian explosion tells us we went from earthworms to triceratops or whatever in 10 million years. Explain the TE on that, please. I wish I were a mimetic infection. If people would be infected by my truth, then the world would be a much better place. Now, you wouldn't expose yourself to Ebola, but you would want to, say, get a mumps, measles, rubella vaccine. So what I have is like a mumps, measles, rubella vaccine. I prevent people from being incredibly stupid if they listen to me. Now, unfortunately, one of the biggest qualities of incredibly stupid people is just like you, the prickly stickler, and they don't listen to me at all. So, goodbye. Since you've decided to position me as a virulent virus upon humanity, I shall hide you from this channel. Since you've equated me with Ebola, you are now hidden. Maybe everybody else just needs to take care of their own business. It's like, why am I responsible for doing more than telling the truth and explaining things correctly? How am I responsible for getting other people to care? The best answer is we don't know. End the sentence there. Jesus, people are so allergic to ambiguity. I think that's a good standard to have. When someone equates me with Ebola, that's that's a hideable. Then why do you think you know where species come from? If you even were halfway honestly evaluating the evolutionary case, you'd say they failed to make the case yet. At least you'd say that. I want to see what Oliver said. If it caught the Oliver. I mean, evolution does. Maybe nobody here says that, but that's evolution's fundamental claim. We all know TWP is a code word for degenerate orgy, and I'm just the only one brave enough to tell it like it is. If you're assigned an unlimited time budget for any species A to become B, would you still think it were possible? No. But the Cambrian explosion helps explain how evolution doesn't make any sense, because even Darwin said if this were to make any sense, it would have to take an incredibly long time. I mean, but whatever attempted mechanism you might produce, you'd have to concede that you couldn't see dramatic changes over short periods of time. Otherwise, we could reproduce that in the lab for sure, right? Like the reason it has to take 4 billion years is because that's why we can't reproduce it in the lab, right? Yeah. And the explanation heretofore for that rapid expansion has been punctuated equilibrium, which basically says evolutionary pressures cause evolution to happen very rapidly for stretches of time and then go into stasis for stretches of time. But that's just a way of avoiding articulating a mechanism, right? And if you don't articulate a mechanism, then you're just whistling Dixie. Other theories that have real mechanisms and stuff, then you can test that by artificially creating those pressures and seeing actual speciation, No, it's to say we don't have a good explanation for the fossil record. Yes, a branching fossil record suggests evolution, which is why Darwin made not a bad intuitive leap in going there. But even at the time, Lamarck was aware, and Darwin is aware as well, that there was no explanation for an increase in complexity. And the Lamarckian explanation for that was proved to have a lot more actual basis in reality than the Darwinian one, which is to say there is epigenetic change, which is what Lamarck was queuing on. It just doesn't work the way that he was envisioning it working. Well, you're right. The branching fossil record suggests something like evolution. You're right, absolutely. And that's why it wasn't a bad intuitive leap for Darwin to have made. But fortunately, science takes things away from the realm of intuitive leap into articulated theory that makes predictions, that has a stated mechanism, that we can test those predictions, validate or falsify. And unfortunately, even though the fossil record suggests that, we falsified it. Doesn't make any sense. So there's some other explanation for that. We don't know what it is, but we know it's not evolution. We know that evolution has failed to make the case for us to affirm it as the explanation. And accordingly, we would be foolhardy to affirm it as the explanation. Well, so maybe look into the nearly neutral theory. That'll get you on the track I'm talking about. Start with the original understanding of evolution and move through its various changes from Darwin till now and see how the explanation has changed. Okay? So if you start with a nearly neutral theory, that'll put you in a good spot because it'll say, here's why the nearly neutral theory had to be come up with, because scientists had to address the reality that this other thing falsified their previous understanding of evolution. Okay, so and right then you should say, then we throw evolution out the window. It's been falsified. We don't try to change evolution and still claim it to be the same thing, right? Otherwise, you're not being a you're not being intellectually honest. The fact that you've got all these qualifying explanations like genetic drift, epigenetics, the nearly neutral theory, punctuated equilibrium, all these qualifications that try to explain away falsifications, that alone should tell you this is not something that should be taken seriously. This has not been dealt with in an intellectually honest fashion. Okay. It's no longer the theory of evolution, by the way. It was for a while, but theory of evolution always changes. So yeah, I don't pretend to understand the math necessarily. I understand the explanations that things like the math here falsifies the idea that you can explain it like meow. And so I don't necessarily, I math I trust, right? I trust mathematicians. I don't trust evolutionary scientists at all, but I trust mathematicians because they are dealing with something that is only ever validated when proved. In other words, they're dealing with something that's TI as hardcore as it can possibly be. There's never any arguments in math about whether a given proof resolves the question of Mia's conjecture. There might be some discussion initially, but then there'll be widespread agreement that problem has been solved by Joe. There's not actually, now Joe's solution has changed. Now Joe's solution is different, but it's still Joe's solution. That's what evolution is doing. So I'm quite sure. Some math things never get solved or haven't been ever solved yet, At least math has conjectures. Conjectures are the equivalent of theories, right? A math conjecture says, I conjecture the following thing to be true. I can't find an instance, a counterexample that falsifies it, but I can't prove it either. And then mathematicians work for years to either prove or falsify it, right? You can falsify it with a single counterexample. And it gets either proved or falsified. Evolution, if it had 1/1,000,000th the robustness of math, would long since have been in the dust heap, the dustbin, the trash heap. I portmanteaued the trash heap and the dustbin. Portmanteaued. Portmanteau makes a good verb. You know what's interesting is did that prickly, whatever his name was, do you think he actually thought I was superstitious? Do you think he's just feeling very threatened or what? Who would think I'm superstitious? That's a strange thing to say about me. I have never been accused of that before. That's the first time in my life I've ever been accused of being superstitious. There's a lot of things you could say about me. Lots of things. Maybe I'm conceited, arrogant. I hear that a lot. I think I'm so smart. That kind of shit a lot. But superstitious? It's kind of like calling me a squat black lesbian. I smell like wee wee? Well, that doesn't make me superstitious, though. I will acknowledge I probably smell like wee wee. I mean, I don't smell it myself, but I'll take your word for it. You could smell better than I can because I smoke. Oh, I'm doing fine, bud. Hey. People sure, I guess people project their own frame of reference. So if you're, if you're that dumb, you imagine I might be that dumb, you know? Oh, I see. He was trying to say that because I don't believe in MBTI. I correctly understand that people pay attention in different ways and that those attentional approaches pair up to create distinct and finite number of configurations for a variety of reasons. That's not what MBTI says. I mean, talk about backwards anyway. It's like if he were evaluating for superstitiousness, he'd need to evaluate to see if I'm superstitious and then allow that to inform him about his opinion about MBTI. Not conclude that everybody who talks about personality types necessarily must be superstitious just because there are some understandings of MBTI that are superstitious. And it's just like really weak thinking. But I don't know. I must, something about my pheromones must attract a certain quantity of weak thinkers because we get a steady stream of these idiots through, you know? I mean, obviously, it also attracts all of you wonderful people But I guess it also attracts some stinkers too. Let's play a game. It's called Where Did I Leave My Glasses This Time? It's one of my very favorite games to play, obviously, since I play it all the time. Oh, they're here. Great. Seem to be unable to remember that let me see what's going on here. I haven't been reading the chats. Oh, yeah. Well, I'm assuming you're that last guy. If you're not that last guy, well, that's why you shouldn't trust your intuition too much. Normally, I err on the side of caution, but I don't know. I had NI alarm bells going there. Nevertheless, I always have the same policy. Even if you get hit, you can always come back as a different person and be cool this time, and you won't get hidden again. So I'm going to the bathroom. That's why you're looking down the hall. Because I don't want you to see me sitting on the toilet. I don't think that would be appropriate for you. Superstitious. I say, Eric, you don't talk enough. You get on these live streams and you just read the chats. That's all you do. You just read the chats out loud and you just say like one thing and you just don't have anything to say. And you're superstitious. No, I get it, Oliver Land. It was just a ham-fisted way of him attempting to make the claim that personality is superstition without actually stating the claim directly or defending it in any way. But concurrently proving, obviously, this is an individual who has some sort of very valued subjective thing, you know. FI tool, perhaps. You know, FI tool SI5. You don't know me. You can't put me in a box. I'm not box shaped. Everybody's unique and different and also all the same. Sometimes I wonder about Nirvana. Are they actually a good band? I don't really think they're that good. Although I do like Polly want a cracker. I think I should get off her first. Man, that's a good song. But that's the thing about Nirvana songs. It's like I acknowledge the quality of the songs, but I don't actually like them. I mean, who really wants to listen to an actually depressed INFJ masterclass depression chic, 1990s circa depression chic? You know, I just don't think it ages very well as an aesthetic. 1990s depression chic hasn't really stood the test of time very well. Of course, I'm a lot more sensitive to dark stuff than I used to be. I really avoid dark stuff. And I'm also more attentive to lyrics than I used to be. I used to barely listen to lyrics. Even if I could sing them all, I wouldn't be paying attention to them in terms of what they meant. It's like the one area in life where I didn't listen to the words. But nowadays, if I don't like what a song's saying in the lyrics, that's enough to ruin it for me, maybe. You know, I don't like 90s hip hop misogyny, or even contemporary 2000s era misogyny, I guess is a better way to put that. I don't like that, those lyrics. It didn't used to bother me. It just, whatever, you know, I just thought, well, he's being edgy or something. I don't know. No, I'm a little bit more of a sensitive guy. And I say to dark things, quit tugging on my feels. Trying to listen to what song Rachel's listening to right now. I suspect that something I said about music and lyrics made her want to listen to a certain song. But I don't know what it is. I can't really hear it from in here. It's too hot inside for two jackets. I'm going to have to grow reaccustomed to the cold weather routine of taking off jackets, putting jackets on. It's getting chilly. But according to according to Rachel's phone's weather report, tomorrow it's going to get 79. It's going to get up to 85 on Wednesday, supposedly. And then get cool after that. I'll believe it when I feel it, you know. The weather, like, I remember like looking 10 days ahead to the 21st and 22nd, which are this Friday and Saturday coming up. And it said it was going to be 89 on Friday and 69 on Saturday, 10 days ago. Or 10 days from, less than 10 days ago. But, first of all, how can they predict it's going to be 20 degrees colder the next day, 10 days in advance? As recently as, as close as a few days before the wedding, it was saying it was going to be in the 90s on our wedding day. And then we ended up having a beautiful day. It wasn't that hot at all. I know you want me to go to bed, but I don't know why I'm awake either, okay? I should be tired and sleeping right now by any logic that I can understand. But I feel happy. I feel like I don't want to go to lie down. I want to stay awake. Well, Eliana Diaz, have you talked to him about it? If you pay rent there, maybe you could pay rent someplace else. Or you have to help deal with his sick mom. Well, how long until she dies? Approximately. Look, it paid off for me and Rachel to live through the suck for a couple of years. In the end, they did die and it paid off. So if you're worried that maybe she'll never die, my experience is that eventually she will. That kind of depends, Hasty Blake, as to whether it can help you learn who you are or not. The thing is, Hasty Blake, if you are a type of person who has as an absolute value some idea like, you can't put me in a box, I'm a unique human being, I won't be, I'm who I decide to be, and no map can tell me who I am, then you're probably not going to be interested in typology or dismissive of it or even adversarial towards it. But I remind you, Eliana Diaz, to keep the example of me and Rachel in mind. It sucked ass living at my dad's house while my mom had Alzheimer's and my dad had depression and plan to shoot himself. So no, we're not all that different. It's just the thing is, it's like it never is the case that Rachel wakes up one day and she acts just like me, and I wake up one day and act just like Rachel. Even if you were just communicating with us via in the chat, you'd be able to tell which one of us it is in short order because we act like who we are. The thing is, there are other, and I don't act anything like Rachel. However, there are other people who do seem to be a lot like Rachel or a lot like me. And yet, it's, it's like Rachel and I are married here in this house. We can each be doing exactly what we want right now. And nobody is putting any pressure on either of us to do anything except exactly what we feel like. What am I doing? I'm talking. What is she doing? She's listening. She's in the other room in bed listening to this on her phone. So, what does that tell you? Well, it tells you that by nature, when I am doing whatever I feel like doing, there's a good chance it's talking. When she's doing what she feels like doing, it's a good chance she's listening. When we get into bed to go to sleep, we have different behaviors that we engage in consistently every time. She plays Subway Surfer on her phone until she's really ready to go to sleep, in which case she puts on like magic card videos to listen to, like pick a card, tarot pull card things, or like how do you know if they're your twin flame or your soulmates? Shit like that, um, so I was thinking last night in bed, or actually tonight before I got up and realized I wasn't going to, that what we both do is first we go to our fourth slot function. When I first get into bed, I go to SI. I roll around, I say right, I stretch, I yawn, I get myself all comfortable. And then when it's time for me to actually go to sleep, I go to my dominant function. I start pretending in my head. I tell myself a story about, imagine myself in an imaginary land with magical powers, stuff like that. So that's where, um, that's how I end up actually going to sleep. For Rachel, how does she actually end up going to sleep? She reverts to her dominant function too. She listens to stuff and she's in NI mode. When she's getting first in her pre going to sleep thing, she goes to her fourth slot function, plays a video game. That's SE. And then when it's time to actually try to make herself go to sleep, she goes to her dominant function. It's not a good dominant function for going to sleep because it's a readiness response function. Only to get ignored, cold shouldered, and poker face ignored. Now, I don't know if that pattern I've described there, fourth and first, is universally true for everybody in their fourth and first, but I'm just explaining that there are other people who have the same approach to as I do to going to sleep. There are still other people who have the same approach to Rachel, and what's notable is whatever your approaches are towards a variety of things in life, they stay the same throughout your life, from early on to late in life. I'm indulging myself by live streaming right now because I kind of wanted to talk out that hypothesis again. Besides having talked it out earlier with Rachel, I didn't feel like it was in my SI very well, so I wanted to talk it out again. But what I should be doing right now is finishing my video called Eric's Manifesto. I've had several recording sessions for this short video that I'm making, trying to, in a nutshell, and organize the concepts as well as I can. If I had good TE, I would have just bullet pointed it out on a piece of paper first, rather than trying to keep it all in my head. But Papa's Freezeria. It's a time management game making certain foods. Ironically, it helps with my anxiety. Is that a TE thing? Yeah, that's a TESE thing. SE is executing all that shit. TE is figuring out how to execute it in a way that it lets you get everything done in time. But really, you're using your tool function there. You're playing like first I run over here and put pepperonis on this one, and I put it up on that thing, and then I go over there and I put the breads in the oven. If it's like that, it's more of an SE thing. I'm not looking for any business, Hasty Blake. I do type people professionally. It costs $100. Whenever somebody hires me, I do the best possible job I can. But I don't. I'm not really happy when I see the PayPal email that says you've received money. I go, oh fuck. Now I gotta type somebody. If you want to see how I type people, you can watch a video or a typing session. Some people say go ahead and publish it, in which case I do. There's no requirement to publish. Some people, about half I'd say I don't want to publish. But anyway, I've been doing it for years. I really know what I'm doing. And I've been doing it sort of publicly and transparently and articulating the processes. I mean, I'm by far the best typologist. That's not me being arrogant, it's just reality. It's an unfortunate reality. I wish somebody else would take the torch. Because I'm not really very obsessed with credit or something, although I'm sure that's what everybody thinks because I'm always insisting on exclusively right about it. But as always, the only reason I insist that is because that is the case. Not because I wish it weren't the case so badly. Yeah, not everybody's been doing it for years and knows what they're doing, though. That's not the only reason I know what I'm doing. I've been doing it publicly for years, under scrutiny, justifying it to everybody, getting feedback, incorporating it where appropriate, etc. Plus, the SI part that matters is I've had so many opportunities to type so many different people with the same questions and see the variations in responses and how those things correlate with responses to other questions that for me, although I haven't established it as a case, others should believe because I'm not doing that kind of data gathering and presentation. But from my own data gathering and that is not protected against bias. In other words, it's not double blind or something like that. But I'm not biased, so it doesn't matter. I mean, the thing is, I'm not subject to being influenced in my evaluation of data because of bias. Double blind studies are important because most people are. Yeah, it was so FI front stack. And it seemed instrumental, probably like second or fourth, I'm not sure. I think he's either an ESFP or an ESTJ, but I'm not sure which. Of course, I will always say that about anybody I've not typed before, actually done a typing session on, is that I can only speculate about their type. And, like I was quite convinced that CJ O'Connell had to be an ENTP before I typed him. Because an ISFJ, when they're inning for the brief, for the limited amounts of time that they do it, can look like an ENTP if you don't actually test them, if you don't actually type them, I should. There are some clear indicators that I should have picked up on. His extroverted intuition expressed in a lot of sensory ways. He had a lot of different pictures up and stuff, That's not an Eric thing at all. Well, Hasty Blake, it turns out you weren't that dick after all. I'm very sorry about assuming you were that dick. Um, like I said, this is why one shouldn't trust one's intuition too much. So have a good evening. Thank you very much for being here. Pleasure to talk with you. My apologies again. I don't think the jury's out on them at all. For me, the jury's not out at all. And when there's any reason to qualify my conclusions, I qualify them. So from my perspective, CJ is very clear cut ISFJ. But for other people who are typing with their intuition more, you may not think so. However, as evidenced by Hasty Blake, one should be wary of trusting one's intuition too much. You cloggy bitch! This thing went to Clog University and got its degree in cloggeration. Hey, Blake, you're welcome to come and go without even notifying us at all. Conflagration? Well, conflagration means large fire. But we'll get around to it. We will. I'm feeling my oats, you know? Like I'm feeling happy, interested in things, and like one way I can tell that things are changing in a good way is that I went to bed tonight, and normally around what I think is bedtime. In other words, when I get bored of watching TV, I I take a couple gabapens or whatever and go lie down, and if that's not enough, take a couple of Benadryls too, and then I go to sleep. Well, that's what somebody does who's not really finding joy in life. You know, when I'm as I normally am and should be, I don't want to sleep unless I'm actually super tired or cranky. Then it's like I need to take a nap. And when I'm awake, I don't think what I don't know what I want to do. I just watch TV, I guess. Either I'm watching something and loving it, or I'm doing something else and having fun. You know, I'm looking forward to at some point working on my my manifesto video some more. Even though I took a poor TE approach to it, it's been much less efficiently completed than it should have been. But the most intense conflicts, if overcome, leave behind a sense of security and calm that is not easily disturbed. Yeah. Rachel and I didn't have any conflict between us, but it is true that we had some emotionally intense conversations the last couple of days, processing stuff, and I feel I feel so good in the aftermath of it. The manifesto is about how typology solves for racism, or groupism in general. But I'm going to say racism in the title because that seems to suck people in more. And it's in its ideal. In my vision of it. It's about 5 minutes long, not much longer than that. What's going on here, Dougie? Well, just about everything that anyone could ever want to have happen. What do you want to be going on here? If you tell me what you want to be going on here, I'll let you know if that is, in fact, what's going on here, or I'll tell you the truth if it's not what's going on here. So that way, you're watching from a trench in Ukraine. You need this guy out here for entertainment? If you really are in a trench in Ukraine, let me just tell you, I stand behind Ukraine 1 billion%. And I have been on the internet arguing that we should make NATO admit Ukraine to NATO before Russia even hit Luhansk. So you have a strong advocate on your behalf here, and an unusually informed advocate as well. I remember the Minsk protocols. I know the U.S. promised to be there for you should Russia ever invade, and fuck our weak ass president for failing to follow through on that. Well, yeah, I know manifestos sound like that, but that's not all. Oh well. Nevertheless, I still do stand with Ukraine. That's why I said if you are really from Ukraine. By predicating it with the if, I made sure that my statements were all conditional anyway. So I took no harm. That's what Ukraine should have done. They should have made their defense against Russia a conditional. You're in the Foreign Legion. Foreign Legion sounds like a skin disease. Don't you think so? I think so. It's because Legion sounds like lesion. Doogie's fine. Doogie, whatever. He's fine. I can tell. You know why? Because he's making jokes about Ukraine. Oh, he seems like the kind of fellow who might enjoy my joke about Israel. I'm sure everybody here has heard it except for Dougie, so I'm sorry about repeating it for those of you who aren't Dougie. Maybe Men Like Gods haven't heard it. But here we go. So, a rabbi, a nun, and Hamas walk into a bar that's holding a music festival. And the nun says, let's let Hamas choose the punchline. Too soon, asked the pastor. No, I was not formerly a Moroccan serial killer. Uh, in fact, I have never been Moroccan at all. Well, I may not have told the joke very well. Also, it wasn't my best execution of the joke. And yeah, it's a little too soon, probably. But that's where comedy goes and helps us heal. It helps us heal by making us laugh. It makes us laugh at horrible acts of mass murder. And that's how we heal. So you're welcome. You're welcome for me healing you. No thanks. No. You know that whole pen sword thing? I'm on the pen team. I'm on Team Pen. Have I ever told you guys about the prank that the middle schooler tried to play on me? I think I might have told you about this just the other day. I did, but I'll repeat it because that was the first time I think I'd ever told it. Well, men like gods, that's fine. I accept your feedback and take your notes. I think it works best as a joke when, in the context in which it was made, which was like, somebody was talking about Israel, and I'm like, I don't remember exactly what I was. Something like, that's depressing. Let me see if I can make up a joke about it. And I started with just the walking to the bar thing. And it just wrote itself the rest of the way. In that instance, as a flashy display of and contextually, it probably worked a little better. It was as unnaturally executed a joke as a joke could possibly be in this instance. I mean, sure, I'm going to agree it's not as good as my Helen Keller dead baby combination joke. What do you call Helen Keller juggling 6 dead babies? Impressive. And oh, sure. You know who that's from? I got that from. I occasionally will do that as a way of joking. Does anybody recognize that? And oh, sure. Meow, 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 meow. Anybody recognize who came up with that? Yeah, whatever you want to call that. Anybody? I'll give you 3, 2, 1 to come up with the answer. It's a Steve Martin thing. Steve Martin has some bit like, yeah, like, now that I have all this money, I bought some pretty cool stuff. He listens, so he goes, and oh, sure, maybe I bought some dumb stuff too, like my electrified turtleneck sweater. He said something like that. Well, oh, sure. Well, that's where that's from. It's Steve Martin thing. And yeah, maybe I did. No. He's so good. Steve Martin's so funny. He was a big influence on me comedically as a kid. I had his albums. Oh, you did type it before I said it. Good job, men like gods. You get the point. You get a wonder point for that correct answer. Congratulations. Is it Wednesday? No, it's Sunday. So wonder point values are not doubled. Like one of my favorite Steve Martin jokes as a kid, and I still think it's hilarious, is this joke where he goes, I'm so mad at my mother. She's 109 years old. She calls me up. She wants to borrow $10 for some food. So, I got her doing some work for me, carrying barbells up to the attic. What a great joke. What did the Chinese restaurant manager say when their restaurant closes down? Ching Chong, the restaurant's dead. The restaurant's dead. The restaurant's dead. Ching Chong, the restaurant, Chinese restaurant's dead. You dim some, you lose some, huh? I actually like my answer better. Ching Chong, the restaurant's dead. It's a little racist, but it's hilarious. Ching Chong, the restaurant's dead. That's the best answer to that question. Oh. Now, you gotta admit, everybody, that's a skill right there that's hard to pull off. Somebody gives you the setup for a joke, and you come up with a better punchline for it than the actual joke. If you've not listened to it, you should listen to that Ching Chong Ting Tong Ling Long song by that Chinese guy. It's so funny. Ching Chong means I love you. Ling Long means I want you. It's a funny song. Now that's some dark humor, Boba Fett. That's a little dark even for me, I think. Meow. It's like my joke. When I went to the DPRK, I was treated to a meal at their fanciest restaurant. It was a bowl of rice. Oh, happy kitty. Eat and purr and pet and eat and purr and pet. Yes, you're a good and important kitty friend. Bears are good. I'm not going to disagree with you there. Bears are good. Morally good, I mean. They're some of the most moral animals there are. They're always doing charity work for orphans. Oh, my wonderful, wonderful kitty man, eating your food with your mouth as you can, getting these pets, letting me let you eat and get these pets, I bet. Oh, yes. That's called Aria to kitty eating food. I mean, if you're like me, you're very surprised that Eric's up singing and making jokes at 1:30 in the morning without any amphetamines. What's up with that? That only happens when you think life is fun, when you're feeling good. And I'm feeling good, like a young man should. I'm still young. I just turned 17. It was a hard 17 years, as you can see. I spent my first 17 years of life as President of the United States. Why not 16? Well, I quit after the first year of my 5th term. And finally someone realized, wait a second, you can't serve more than 2 terms. Wait just a cotton picking second, I said. I really liked this UFO video I watched on Hulu earlier. It was about things that presidents had said, mostly had said about UFOs. Okay, well, what you should say instead, men like gods, is I respect the Un family for enslaving their populace. There's no they. The DPRK isn't a group of people all unified behind some mission, collectively deciding things. It is the Un family and their country full of slaves. So that's one way to resist westernization. And it's possible to respect that. Personally, I don't, but you can take the most out of that. Oliver Lanahan. Lanahan, meow, meow, meow. Okay, well, that I can understand. Whatever. Kim family, Un family, Kim Jong-un, Kim Il-sung, or whatever his name is. I stand corrected. You are correct. Yeah, well, would you like to defect to North Korea? And go try it out? You can be like those idiot Americans who like defected to the Soviet Union. Boy, did they regret that. Gaddafi was such a classic. I mean, he really is the quintessential North African dictator. I can't even think of another one. Muammar. That's a great name. Muammar Gaddafi. Muammar. I know. Let's name our kid Momar. Why? Because, it'll be easy to tease him. Momar, Momar, you are a blow blar. Things like that. Interesting. Okay, well, I guess Juchi is a word that has two different meanings. So I learned something there. I did not know that. I thought it was just a North Korean political propaganda word. Idi Amin. That's the other one that actually came to my mind, but he's not North Africa. I mean, you think of the Shah of Iran, but of course, here, if you want to really get into some hypocrisy, let's talk about those wonderful dictators in Saudi Arabia that we love so much. No, they're not dictators, they're kings. You know who really didn't pull off military chic very well, I don't think. Well, okay. And take away the cigars, and the Cubans didn't pull off military chic very well. You toss in the cigars, all of a sudden, their military shabbiness kind of looks like rugged, you know. Well, I mean, I would agree that none of our nation's military uniforms really stand out to me as excellent, but the Marine dress uniforms look pretty good. General Augusto Pinochet. You're going South America, huh? Okay. Where was Pinochet? Chile? Your favorite camo pattern is Rhodesian brush? Argentinian. Hmm. Well, good for him being anti-commie. It's like, if you gotta have totalitarianism, a dictator's better than a fucking commies. I told you it was Chile. I was right. It was Chile. You know, a secular dictator, a non politically ideological secular dictator is your best case scenario in totalitarian regimes. In other words, Putin is better than China or Iran because, at least with secular, self interested dictators, um, there's there's not a religious or ideological element that allows people to get quite so entrenched into institutionalized totalitarianism, you know? I know, I've often said, Boba Fett, that the worst thing America possibly could have done, if you're going to take out anybody in the Middle East, don't take out Saddam Hussein. He's the only fucking secular dictator in the place. Take out anybody but Saddam Hussein. If you absolutely insist on going and taking over another country for no reason, exactly, Oliver Linehan. It's like we can stand over here and nitpick the Israelis about how they're dealing with the barbarians, but let's not forget who the civilized people and who the barbarians are. Western society actually is better than all the alternatives. At least there are institutions of accountability, you know? Even if they don't always work, whatever, at least they're there. At least there's some justice. If you've got theocratic governance, there is no justice because rulings are predicated on things that are subject to interpretation, like religious texts. Take the Saudis, please. Yeah, I agree with you. I just flew in from the Middle East, and boy, are my arms blown up by Islamists. And it's like, think about what happens to any Islamic country when they attempt to westernize. Look at Lebanon, look at Turkey, look at Syria. What a nightmare theocratic nonsense is, you know? The way Islam manifests in Islamic countries in the contemporary world is anathema to civilization. It's subverting the secular to the sacred, and you can't have a civilized country when you do that. Civilization is predicated on freedom of conscience and freedom of expression. A country that has criminal penalties for atheism can only be called a savage, barbaric society. Pre Enlightenment, you know? That's very pre Enlightenment thinking. You know what? Yeah, I know. Iran is really tragic. The theocrats get hold of what was very much a secularly inclined society. I read this book. Oh, it was so sad. It was about intellectuals getting out of Iran when the Shah was toppled. Well, Assad comes across as a great guy. His phone was hacked. They found out he was turning down honeypots and writing love letters to his wife. Yeah, there's no doubt that Pinochet was brutal. There's no doubt that a secular dictator is not the ideal form of governance. But I'm just saying it's better than ideological or religious forms of totalitarianism. Like Pol Pot is worse than Pinochet. The Soviet Union was worse than Russia is now. Even though in both instances you've basically got a totalitarian government. It's just Putin doesn't really care about things he doesn't feel like caring about. He's so, there's not a party to enforce some sort of weird ideological vision on the world. Israel should either grant Palestinians full autonomy over Gaza and West Bank or go their own way, remove settlers, and impose entire. Yeah, no, you're exactly right, Oliver. It's exactly what I said the other night. In fact, something very similar. They need to either give them their own territory. Well, no, there's not anything to it. They need to just say, since they have them, since they're living someplace, there's zero benefit to them continuing to have any authority over them at all. They should just say, you are now your own country. Now, if you attack us, you're another sovereign nation going to war with us, and we will fuck you up. Right? It's the only sensible thing imaginable. Instead, they've got this morally untenable position. But just say, like, don't help them at all. Just be like, okay, you're your own country now. Bye. I mean, why not? Why wouldn't Israel do that? Then, if Palestine, which would be called Palestine again, if Palestine wants to attack them, well, then Israel can go take action according to the rules of war. This other sovereign nation attacked us. We are going to blow the living shit out of them. So, I mean, there's zero doubt whatsoever that the Palestinians, wherever they live right now, there's not Israelis living there. If there are, yank them out of there and just say, okay, fine, you're your own country now. Idiots. I mean, we're the idiots for ever not doing this in the first place, but whatever. Now, let's see if you can handle it, right? Can you actually handle being your own country? We'll find out. Enjoy yourselves. You can seek aid from all your Muslim friends and put on your big boy pants now. Yeah, obviously it's absolutely insane that Israel hasn't already long since done that. It's not like doing that is siding with the Palestinians. If you frame it like I frame it, like and actually how it actually is. So doing what they're currently doing is not siding with Israel. They're just, nor is it siding with the Palestinians. They're just siding with ongoing violence. And doing what I say and what Oliver says and what Astapasta says is not doing, is not letting the Palestinians win or something. You're just claiming complete and final victory over the matter. Now you can wash your hands of them entirely, and knowing how crazy mad they are, understandably, they'll probably attack you again anyway. And then you can blow the living shit out of them and nobody can say a goddamn word. Because after all, they're a sovereign country that attacked you. The only reason, if any resistance gets in Israel, they're like, this is our holy land. You fucking pricks. You can't go steal someone's country and say, this is our holy land. uh, did you think that what happened in Germany was a lesson that you should be taking notes and so you can do that to somebody else? Is that what you thought? Israel doesn't need to make a peace deal. They just do what I say. You are no longer our problem. We have nothing to do with you, no control over you, except to say you are not, none of you are allowed to cross our border. That's all they have to do. They don't need to get agreement from the Palestinians that they're going to be peaceful. Just say, you're no longer have anything to do with us. As far as we're concerned, you're your own country. Now, let's see what happens. Oh, the country of Palestine just invaded us? Well, let's bomb them back to the Stone Ages. I'm as surprised as you, everybody else, that the country of Palestine, as poorly armed as they are, would choose to invade the country of Israel, as well armed as we are. But you saw for yourself, that independent country decided to invade us. So we have decided to blow them back into the Stone Ages. Well, I mean, making the Palestinians stay in their ghetto while not giving them any authority over themselves is very much a Nazi move. Right? So I'm not saying that Israel has opened concentration camps, but they definitely copied the Nazis in that regard. Well, look, there's a whole bunch of hurt feelings in the Middle East, right? Palestinians have hurt feelings. The Israelis have hurt feelings. Nobody's going to agree to anything that makes anybody think the other side has won. That's why you frame it like I frame it. That way, the Israelis get to cut the Palestinians off with a big fuck you and an addendum of asterisk, I dare you, independent country, because that comprises an act of war from one country upon another for which nobody in the UN will say a peep when we blow you to smithereens. In fact, we'll be justified in doing so and have the moral high ground. Now that's something that you might find some traction for in Israel, right? Because instead of making Israel admit that they fucked over the Palestinians really bad and now they're reaping what they've sowed. You get to have them frame it as, oh, this is a good way to get rid of this problem forever. You mean by killing them all? Yep. Well, I bet there'd be a lot of support for that in Israel. All they got to do is attack us one more time once we cut them off, and then we can just blow the shit out of all of them. But that's not justified bombing civilians. Well, if they insist on putting their military operations among civilian populations, then they don't give us any choice. That's called collateral damage. That's totally different, ridiculous comparison, Boba Fett. Well, obviously, it didn't work very well. One simple trick to make Israel go from morally iffy to morally righteous. I mean, there's no doubt that maintaining a population of second-class citizens, refusing to grant them their autonomy, etc., is not even iffy. It's unacceptable. It's morally impermissible. But nations aren't moral agents, and that's where realism comes into play. And individuals within those nations, their primary responsibility when serving the public is the nation's interests. So it makes international moralism kind of a moot conversation in some regards. But international law is another matter. And just war theory underlies a lot of international law on the matter. So what I'm saying is, Israel, get yourself on the right side of international law, and then you can be way more fucked up. Well, I mean, the point is, instead of us drawing conclusions about what the Palestinians want or going to do, blah, 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 just cease to make it your own problem. And then let the chips fall where they may. Yeah. They don't want citizens. They don't want to be Israelis. They don't even. They say Israel isn't even a country. It doesn't exist. I say that about the PRC, the People's Republic of China. It's not even a country. It doesn't exist. The Taiwanese nationalist government still has, in my opinion, legal authority over mainland China. I'm in favor of a one China solution where Taiwan is the government of all of China. Not where China is the government of Taiwan. Well, I mean, the thing is, I'm just trying to be pragmatic here, men like gods. I'm saying you're never going to sell a solution to the Israelis that makes any Israeli feel like they let the Palestinians win anything. That's why an actual solution has to be framed as a Palestinian loss. Israel is way more powerful, and it's not like the international community is going to stop Israel because they're nuclear armed. So, on a practical level, the only possible approach towards a solution is to convince Israel that the actual solution is a Palestinian loss. Puerto Rico, China? No, that refers to dishware from Puerto Rico. Okay, that's different. Puerto Rico is the land of grapefruit flavor. You've mistaken grapefruit flavor for oppressive communist China. Oppressive and insane communist China. Well, I agree with you, men like gods, but I suspect at this point that's as much an excuse as anything. At this point, Israel hates the Palestinians so much they just want to see them suffer. Puerto Rico, Puerto Rico is how you say it in Spanish. If you want to love a beautiful woman, come to the land of Puerto Rico. For the land of Puerto Rico is itself like a beautiful woman. Come to our beaches, enjoy our grapefruits. That's my advertisement. Well, but put it this way, Aspasta. They want to decisively win the political battle. In other words, to have the other side concede that they are a country that exists and to be to give in, they want them to give in. It's about breaking the will. Exactly. That's what Israel wants to do. They want to break their will at this point. Puerto Rico is like a beautiful woman. She'll take your money and leave you on the beach. Drunk, getting a progressively bad sunburn. Is that what beautiful women do? Hopefully not most of them. Rachel doesn't do that. Maybe it's just because we don't like the beach. Then late one Hallows Eve, a single red eye shone out of the darkness. Was it a demon? Or was it a witch? Actually, it was just my nipple. You don't see it usually because either I have my shirt on or it's light out, but one of my nipples actually glows in the dark. This one right here. One of my nipples glows in the dark. It's this nipple right here. It's like that song says. Everybody wants to rule the world, including like Putin and everybody. Me, I just want to rule, like in the colloquial sense, like in the sense of like that rules. That's my goal, is to rule like that. Oh my God, Eric rules so much like that. No, I agree. Look, my point is not that Israel should do that. My point is we got to trick them into giving the Palestinians their own country. Then, hopefully, Palestine will not attack Israel. And if they actually do attack Israel, hopefully Israel shows some restraint, But I think you're maybe missing my key point, which is we have to trick Israel into affording the Palestinians their own country. Axel Rose fries meme. Okay. Axel Rose fries meme. That's sufficient. Those 4 words next to each other are sufficient to sufficient to get me to Google something. Oh, these aren't nice. These are making fun of him being fat. Is that really him? That's not funny. I tell you what you should Google instead is Danzig cat food meme. I've got something to say. I bought kitty litter today. The video of Danzig walking out from the grocery store with a couple of bags in one hand and a box of kitty litter in the other hand. I much prefer Boba Fett. The Danzig one is much better. It's the same concept, sort of, but it's much better. I've got something today. I bought kitty. I got something to say. I bought kitty litter today. Doesn't matter much to me as long as this did. Because that song is got the worst lyrics imaginable. It, it's like, I got something to say. I killed your baby today. Something like that. Doesn't matter much to me as long as they are dead. Well, I mean, we should remember that when we fat shame anybody, we fat shame everybody who's got issues about that. We make fun of Danzig's evolution from the guy who sang that Misfits song to the guy carrying cat litter out of the grocery store. That's fine. He should be made fun of for his lyrics in that song anyway. Here's the lead singer of the Misfits. I don't know if his first name is Glenn or not. I just know him as Danzig. Misfits weren't a metal band, though. They were a punk band. Make your work in Axl Rose look like a lesbian couple who own an antique shop in Portland is also fine. That's also fine. It takes a razor sharp intuition to know exactly where all the lines are. But I mean, particularly, I guess, razor sharp extroverted intuition. Even then, you can't be perfect. Nobody can be perfect except Jesus. When I was a kid, I went running into the ocean and my uncle yelled, "High tide." That's horrible. I didn't even understand what you were talking about until it took me a few seconds to process it. That kind of toxic shit should be shut down in every instance. I I've gotten so sensitive in my old age, I tell you. I'm like an INFP girl at an art therapy class. It's horrible. It makes me sad hearing about it. Um, you know, there's this book. It's like one of those NI books that kind of got an Eckhart Tolle quality to it, but it's more Dao Poo than Eckhart Tolle. Anyway, it's called The Word. And I started reading it one time. And its primary message, though it's very NI, not TI, is words are the most, uh, words are so hugely important, and how sacred words are, how critical it is that people be responsible in their words. And the thing is, what like INFPs probably understand better than anybody else is how easy it is for a person to make subjective connections to words that aren't about them, but that are about things in general. So they're very cautious, very careful with their words. Like, I, you can really see this um, with Dulles. I remember that Steve Martin joke. Some people have a way with words. This is like a joke that is one of his extended things of like, I'm a modern guy. I've got important things going on. I'm a professional comedian. Some people have a way with words, and other people uh, not have way. you know, it's like Steve Martin's shtick that he did is when he was a stand-up comedian was pretend to be like braggadocio kind of, but be so bad at it that he would. Right. I mean, he didn't actually thank them all, but yeah, he's like, I want to thank you all for being here, each and every one of you for being here tonight. Thank you, and you, and you, and you. Thank you, thank you. Right, that's how it works, right? His character that he's playing on stage is somebody who believes himself to be an excellent stand-up comedian and everything else, but is so out of touch that the things he's bragging about aren't things one would brag about. Like, hey, you talking about, he has this joke about, so I bought my dog I bought this thing, and my dog slobbered all over it. I tried to take it back to the store, and they said, we won't take that back because it has spit all over it. And they wouldn't take it back to the store because it had spit all over it. I don't know this Google phonics stereo. I'll have to look that up. I mean, he's got so many funny things. Like, you've not seen his Saturday Night Live skit with Martin Short of A Christmas Carol, which they did, I don't know, a few years back. He came up with a joke. I decided to take up smoking. My doctor said I wasn't getting enough tar in my diet. So, okay, I think I'm going to wrap this up. Um, Maybe I'll go peek in on Rachel upstairs, see if she's still awake. Um, and then I still don't feel like going to sleep right now, but probably watch some shit on TV, you know. Okay. I love you all. Thanks for being here. Good night.